Okay, let's now get into our first subject called communication. If there's one skill to develop, as well as any other, this is probably one of the major ones, communication. And by the way, I've got a theme for this seminar for these 2 days. The evening seminar, the theme was, the major key to your better future is you. I've changed it just a little to read, the magic key to your better future is you. There's magic in a smile. There's magic in a handshake. There's magic in human contact. There's magic in believing. In fact, that's a good book if you haven't got it. Add it to your library. The Magic of Believing by Bristol. Good book. Anyway, hopefully these 2 days we'll talk a little bit more and maybe discover some more of the magic of human contact, human ability, human potential. And communication is one of those major skills to develop. See if you can't find the magic within you that can reach other people. How to affect other people with words. Major challenge. To get your ideas across, to get people to understand what you're trying to say, get them to understand how you feel. And at first, words are a bit clumsy when it comes to trying to express an emotion or an idea or a feeling, but if you'll practice it, and especially if you know the components of good communication, it'll really start to help. I heard the story about the preacher in the backcountry down in the southern part of the United States was taking over this little country church for the first time, and he was up preaching his first sermon. And he said, congregation, first of all, this church has got to crawl. And in order for this church to crawl, everybody's got to show up and do their Christian duty. And if everybody will show up and do their Christian duty, this church can begin to crawl. And the congregation understood what the preacher said, and they all responded, let it crawl, preacher, let it crawl. He said, next, this church has got to get up and walk. In order for this church to walk, everybody has got to tell their Christian story and try to win somebody else. And if everybody will tell their story, try to win someone else, this church can begin to walk. And the congregation understood what the preacher said, and they all responded, let it walk, preacher, let it walk. He said, next, this church has got to run. And in order for this church to run, everybody has got to divide up, serve on the committees, and do the work of the church. And if everybody will divide up, serve on the committees, do the work of the church, this church can begin to run. And they all understood what the preacher said, and they responded, let it run, preacher, let it run. He said, finally, this church has got to fly. And in order for this church to fly, everybody has got to reach down deep and give some of their cash. And if everybody will reach deep and give a portion of their cash, this church can begin to fly. And they all understood what the preacher said, and they responded, let it walk, preacher, let it walk. Okay, how to make it clear. First of all, we communicate for two primary reasons, and here they are. Number one, we communicate just to get along. You can't even function in the barest minimums without some kind of communication. If you want the bread, you have to learn to ask for it. The barest of communication. So that's number one. Here's number two. We communicate to accomplish some purpose. A specific purpose. Now, communication starts from somewhere, and for you, communication starts with you. Good phrase to remember. Your world begins with you. This is not to be self-centered, but your world is around you, your own consciousness and your own awareness. And so for things to work well, first of all, it's got to work well with you. Part of my training in getting me turned around, headed in the right direction, when I first met Mr. Schoaf, the man who helped to formulate the ideas that helped to change my business and social and personal life, was for me to understand that the biggest changes that was going to have to be made in my future were going to have to be made personal. I kept hoping the weather would change and the government would change and prices would change and my neighbors would change and the people would change and my friends would change and that the economy would change and that the country's direction would change. I kept waiting for change all around. And then he's the one who taught me. What changes your world is not wishing for change. What changes your world is changing. You've got to change. And sure enough, As a Man Thinketh, a book by James Allen, there's a little phrase in there that says, humans are rather strange. We curse the effect and nourish the cause. We want it to change, but we don't want to change. Interesting. The guy puts sand in his shoes and he can hardly walk. And you say, well, how can you walk with that sand in your shoes? The guy says, I can hardly walk. You say, well, why do you do that? I said, I don't know. I've just been doing it for years. Incredible. The guy puts tacks in his bed and he can hardly sleep. You say, well, how can you sleep with all those tacks in your bed? The guy says, I can hardly sleep. You say, well, why would you do that? He said, I don't know. It's been in the family for years. I mean, we just do things like that. Interesting why we would wish for it to change, hoping it will change, but resisting change. Now, once you understand that all of it starts with you, now you can start making some incredible progress. And good communication with you, for you, that happens to you, the great majority of it starts with you. Now, here's a good phrase to remember. You cannot speak that which you do not know. First of all, you've got to have it before you can speak it, before you can share it. So good communication starts with an awareness that, first of all, to get a good communication going with anybody, it's got to start with some substance on your part. Now, how to consciously grow and build the substance from where communication comes from, that is the key. It's like, first of all, making deposits. You can't withdraw anything till you put something in. We all need to be consciously aware every day of gathering up the ideas, the inspiration, the feelings that we're going to use for future communication. Future meaning maybe in the next 5 minutes, but maybe the next 5 days, 5 weeks, 5 months, 5 years. Consciously aware. It is not that difficult for the years to pass and to not be conscious of what's happening in the way of demands or what's going to come in the way of opportunity for you, and just drift along and not be much further ahead a year from now than you are right now. Simply because you just let the days pass. But if you have a conscious awareness of what it takes to effectively affect other people, to get your ideas across, to get decisions, to express your feelings and your opinions, once you do that deliberately and consciously and daily and consistently, now that's what starts your own personal development. Let me give you 4 key words to be aware of that will help you in putting together a conscious awareness program of developing a source of communication, making these deposits. See, when you talk, you want a verbal check that'll cash. When you speak, you want to speak from something that's there, an awareness that's there, a feeling that's there. And to create this foundation or this reservoir or this deposit or this account from which you can talk, let me give you 4 words that will help you to do that. Here's the first one. Develop an interest. The first word is interest. Develop an interest in 2 primary things, life and people. If you're interested in life, see, right away, daily, weekly, monthly, you're going to be gathering up information and impressions and awareness more so than someone who is not that interested. Most people want to make it, but they don't have that interest, that keen interest in what's going on around them. So the two things to be interested in is life and people. Make a study of those. Make sure you're entering something in your journal constantly about life and about people, business life and social life, what's happening around you. It's called gathering so that you can use it for future conversations. Now you do this deliberately by using these 4 words and thinking about them. What I like to always do is develop a mental tick list, things to remember as you proceed through the day. Now, at first, when you develop a little mental tick list of things to remember, sometimes it's a little awkward, right? It's like learning to play the piano. My teacher said, here's the right-hand scale. So I got those, no problem. Then my teacher says, now we're going to run the left-hand scales. I got those, no problem. Then I remember the day when she said, we're going to play both hands together. I thought, now that'll be tricky. Right? How could you do them both together? And I remember looking at one, looking at the other, but finally, right, I got to where I could play both hands together. Then I remember the day she said, now, we're going to read the music, play both hands. I thought, wow, how would you do that, right? And I'm looking at the music, looking at my hands, right? But finally I got that going. Then I remember the day she said, now, we're going to watch the audience play the music, read the music, play both hands. I thought, now, how could you possibly do that? Right? But sure enough, I finally got to where I could watch the audience, read the music, and play both hands. Right? After a while. At first, it was a little awkward, but after a while, I finally got those, right, 4 things in line. So, here's what I want to give you. It's a little mental tick list to remember. And at first, it may seem a little awkward to try to remember these 4 things in gathering information for future conversations, communication. But just try. And then finally, it'll come naturally. So the first word is interest. Be interested enough to find ideas to put in your journal. Be interested enough to look around. Keep your eyes open. What's going on? Be alert. Don't miss anything. Okay, here's the second word for good communication. Developing this reservoir. And that is fascination. Fascination goes a little bit beyond interest. Fascination means you take a second look. Fascination means you're just not interested in just surface information. You want to know what's behind it. What does it really mean? So if you really want to develop this reservoir of information for future conversations, you've got to be fascinated with life, fascinated with stories, fascinated with human behavior. Why do people act like they act? Why do they do what they do? Now also be interested and fascinated with your own life. How come I act like I act? Why do I always do this? Why do I feel this way? See, that kind of fascination will start helping you to gather up the information for good communication. Fascinated. Here's the third word, and this is a good one. Sensitivity. Develop a sensitivity to life and people. Let what's happening during the day touch you. Let it affect you. Develop a sensitivity to both tragedy and success, both the highs and the lows of life. A sensitivity to people's feelings, a sensitivity to the complexity of life as well as the simplicity of life. How people are different and yet so much the same. A sensitivity to people's beliefs, the way they look at things. Here's a good phrase, let life touch you. Don't let it kill you, but let it touch you. Be sensitive. When Judy and I were married, I'll never forget, we got back from Europe. One time we were staying at the Waldorf Astoria in New York. It was about Christmas time, I don't know, the 20th of December, something like that. And we decided to rent a car and drive out to Long Island. Judy had never been to Long Island. Judy was raised in the Midwest, farm country too. And on the way out to Long Island, Judy had never been to Harlem. So we left the hotel, and not very far away from the Waldorf Astoria is Harlem. I will never forget the look on Judy's face as we drove through Harlem. Incredible. It was the 20th of December, but in Harlem there was not one sign of Christmas. There was not one light, Christmas light. There was not one Christmas tree. There was not one wreath on any door. There was not one strand of tinsel. No sign of Christmas in Harlem on the 20th of December. And yet a few blocks away on Fifth Avenue and Park Avenue in New York and Rockefeller Center, there's the big blazing Christmas tree, and the ice skaters are skating, and the chestnuts are roasting, and right, the shops are full of clothes, and the shoppers are shopping, and there's this feeling of wealth and affluence, and a few blocks away is Harlem. Incredible. Judy talked about that experience for a long time after that, the impact it made on her. Harlem, and the incredible contrast in people's lives, from the wealthy to the poor, from the advantaged to the disadvantaged. It really affected her. But see, you want to be affected by life. Let it touch you. Let it reach you. When I lived in Northern California, 2 or 3 times a year, I would go to San Francisco, the Tenderloin district. Down at what's known as the bottom of the world. Just go spend a day and see what it's like on the other side of life. Walk the streets where the lonely walk and talk to them. Find out their stories. Go eat where they eat. Visit with them for a while. It's an incredible experience. Because I was raised fairly well, I've never had any tragedy in my life, so I really don't know what it's like. But it's good to have a view and a look. You don't have to go live in poverty, but you got to be aware of it. You got to know about it. You got to be sensitive to it. Man, I got to know there Frank. Frank runs a bar in the Tenderloin in San Francisco. What an incredible place. You wouldn't believe it. Frank sees more tragedy in a week than most people see in a lifetime. Incredible. I'm visiting with him there one day. He said, Jim, see that lady sitting over there at the bar? I said, yes. He said, that's Cookie. He said, how old do you think she is? I said, I don't know. She looks about 45. He said, she's 25. I said, wow. Cookie used to be a go-go dancer. And she developed some kind of bone disease and had all these operations. And now she's got the bolts and the pins and so on trying to hold her together, and she can hardly walk. And he said, Cookie comes in here 3 or 4 times a week and sits right there. And she's also got a little boy, 5 years old. He's dying of leukemia. And said, Cookie comes here and drinks till she can't drink anymore. And usually I have to call a cab and have somebody come take her home. Cookie. The story really got to me. I used to go by after that every once in a while and put some money in an envelope and her name on it and leave it for her to come by and get. The story got me. But that's Frank, Cookie, the Tenderloin, the other side of life, where the difficulties are. We've all got to be sensitive to that. We've got to let it affect us. As you let all of life affect you, so it affects your conversation. So it affects your communication. So people have this incredible sense that there's a great deal about you and your sensitivity and your interest and your fascination with life that makes life uniquely worthwhile for you. And I'll tell you what, it'll show up in your conversation. It'll show up in your feelings. It'll show up in your ability to reach people. Sensitivity. Don't be afraid of it. Use it. Develop it. Now here's the 4th word, knowledge. Develop a working knowledge. I've added one more word there, working knowledge of life and people. A working knowledge means a systematic way of gathering up all the information that comes your way. and try to put it into some workable form. That's why we suggest a journal. You've just got to have a daily journal to record the ideas and the impressions and the feelings and the things that come your way, so that you'll have this working knowledge, this depth of awareness. Now, if you'll work on those 4 words and be consciously aware that you're working on knowledge, sensitivity, fascination, and interest about life and people in a deliberate way, a daily way, a consistent way, so that when you get ready to talk, there'll be all this substance there waiting to back up whatever you have to say. Here's a good phrase: let what you say be the tip of the iceberg of all you know, and all that you feel, and all that you're aware of. Let what you say only be a small portion of all you know and feel. I'm sure we've all had experiences talking with some people, and sure enough, they said far more than they knew, very quickly. All right. Now, let me give you 4 steps to good communication. Here are some of the components of communicating well that I think are important to keep in mind. First of all is have something good to say. And that's why we went into all these other words, developing this reservoir, this account. What that is to deliberately be gathering daily, consciously, better things to say. Have something good to say. Good communication takes conscious preparation. When you hear a story, you just say, oh, I'm sure I can use that in years to come. That's a great story. I got to remember that. I've got to keep that. I've got to store it. I've got to put it somewhere. Right? You're alert all day long in gathering up things to have something good to say. It is said that for every hour of public presentation, you need many days of conscious preparation. And the same is true of personal conversation. What you want to make sure is that from now on, you don't treat conversations casually. Because casualness brings casualties. Not only on the freeway, but in conversation. Just make sure your conversations aren't casual. Now, they don't all have to be deadly serious. But almost every conversation is important. Communicating with other people is important. Exchanging ideas is important. Getting our feelings across is important. And if you treat it casually, sure enough, you just won't be much better at it a year from now, 2 years from now than you are today. You've got to treat it important. And part of the importance of treating a conversation, communication, seriously is to have something good to say. Here's another good word: research. Make your whole life process a research in this development of the reservoir for good communication. Now, if you've got a speech to make, or you're going to have a family council, or you're going to get together with somebody, and you've got something important you're going to have to get across. Now, let me give you a good advice. Get ready for it. And sometimes getting ready is a matter of several days of taking some time throughout the day to get ready to get ready. However, if you're going to talk with somebody, we all need to develop a sort of a quick mindset of getting ready to talk to somebody. Putting it in gear, being conscious, being aware. That's called getting ready. But this whole process of getting ready to have something good to say is very important. Research. This is where your library comes in. We'll talk a little bit more about that under personal development. Library. Your journals. Taking notes. Capturing feelings and ideas. That's how you have something good to say. You do it deliberately, consciously. So that's number 1. Have something good to say. First step to good communication. Here's the second step. Say it well. Part of communication is saying it well. And there are some key points on saying it well. Having a good conversation that gets your point across, but also gets the job done. Saying it well is a matter of repetition, conscious repetition. Some people say it over and over and over, but they don't get any better at it. But conscious participation, repetition, will help you to say it better. See, my first seminars, they were not that good. I'll admit that. But guess what? I did it again with the thought in mind of getting better. I did it again with the thought in mind of getting better. Okay? I practiced it some more. I did it some more. I went over it again. I went over it again. And sure enough, if you do it over and over and over and over consciously with the thought of getting better, guess what? Anybody can get better. People often wonder why I can do the evening seminar, 3.5 hours, most of you have been there, and I don't use any notes. Interesting. Once in a while someone asks me, how can you do 3.5 hours and you don't use any notes? And it's very simple. Anybody could do it. Guess why I'm able to do it? I've done it a few thousand times. See, if you do something a few thousand times consciously, sure enough, you will get better and better and better. So whatever you're doing now in the way of communication, the question to ask is, how long do you want it to take to get good at it? You say, well, I want to get good right away. Then you got to do it over and over and over and over. Repetition helps you to get better. So the second step to good communication is saying it well. Now, there's some other points on saying it well. Here they are. 1, say it with sincerity. And I don't know any substitute for sincerity. Almost everybody wants the feeling from someone else that you are being sincere, that you're not playing games with me, that you're really disclosing to me your true feelings, your true awareness, what's going on in your life and your heart and your soul and your mind. Sincerity, there's no substitute for that. Once in a while, someone asks me, when the seminar's finished, they say, look, Mr. Rohn, everybody's gone now, but tell me the truth now. That story you tell about meeting Mr. Schoaf when you were 25 years old, and he hired you, you went to work for him, spent 5 years with him, he taught you the principles, how to turn your life around. Said, now that's just a story, right? That didn't really happen. Isn't that just a story to make all this sound good? Isn't that interesting that somebody would ask me if that was just a story or not, or if it really happened? To be sincere, it's got to be true. You just can't come up with sincerity telling an erroneous story. Now, you might make it sound sincere, but sure enough, someday it'll come back to haunt you. Saying it well is saying it sincerely. Saying it well is saying it accurately. You don't want a lack of credibility to creep into your communication. So you just got to be sincere. Tell the truth. The truth is so powerful, you don't need to dress it up with fiction. Another part of saying it well is saying it with brevity. Don't linger too long on any one point, because I got a good disclosure for you. The human attention span is short. You can't linger too long on any one thing. You've got to move along. So brevity. I used to tell long stories. And I stretched them out so long, people forgot the beginning by the time I got to the end. And now the end doesn't make much sense, right? Because you can't hook them both up. I just drug them out too long. People get weary. You just got to practice being brief. Short. Attention span is short. The best practice on this is to practice with kids, because their attention span is really short, right? And they don't mind telling you, right? You start talking to the kids, right? And kids say, how long is this going to take, right? I mean, right away they get the feeling you're going to take 30 seconds. And you should only take 10, right? I mean, they get bored right away. So short. Make your stories short. Be brief in your illustrations. If you're going to say, here's something that happened to me one time. Don't give people a feeling now that you're about to launch into a 20-minute story. Just make sure you get the feeling across that you're going to be brief. It isn't going to take long. You're going to get the story across. And I guess part of that is our high-powered, speeded-up way of living, especially in this country. But it is true. If you want to be effective in communication, you've got to be brief. On any one point, you can't linger long. And I think I've lingered long enough on that point. Next, saying it well is saying it with style. Now, part of style is your personal style. And this involves a whole lot of things. It can involve gestures. It can involve facial expressions. You talk with your eyes. You know, you speak with your facial expressions as well as with your words. Some people talk more with their hands. That's part of your style. Gestures, all of that. Now, here's the key on this, is to develop your own style. However, be a student of style. First, have something good to say. Second is to say it well. Consciously say it well. Practice saying it well. Get to where the words come more clearly, more freely. Things you used to stumble over when you talked a year ago, you just correct that. You just correct it so that now it flows better. Shorten the stories. Used to be long. Now they're shorter. You just do all that consciously, so that you get better and better at it, saying it well. Okay, here's the third step to good communication. Okay, here's the third step to good communication. And this is so important. Read the effect you're having. Study your audience, whoever your audience may be. If it's one of your children, you just study what's happening to them while you're talking. Right? Look in their eyes, look in their face. Analyze what's going on between you and whoever you're talking to, another person. Whether it's a business conversation or a social conversation, you've got to be keenly aware of what's happening to whoever you're communicating with. Now, a real challenge is communicating with an audience. We had about 1,200 people the other night in Orange County, right? And I've got to make sure that everybody from down here, down in front, way in the back, how to gather up 1,000 people's attention, right, for the 3.5-hour period. Now, that's a real challenge. I didn't used to be that good at it. In fact, when I first started lecturing, I was hardly aware of my audience. I was so absorbed in my notes and my material, guess what? They could have all got up and left, and I would have never known it. I wouldn't have missed them. I'd have just kept right on talking, right? Because I was so absorbed in the material, I was so absorbed in trying to say it right and do it right, that I was not aware of what was going on with my audience. But you've got to read the effect you're having for a really effective communication. Now, if it's just an informal communication situation, you can just ask the question, do you read me? Right? Does it make sense? Did I say it well? And you get this feedback right. So you can actually start checking how you're doing with somebody if it's informal. You can just ask. Okay? Now, what you've also got to learn to do is read some of the subtle things that are going on with whoever you're talking to. Because especially humans, especially adults, you know, when we get a little older, we have these tricky ways of looking like we're interested when we're really not. And if you want to be a good communicator, you just got to pick up some of those signals. Now, part of it you can pick up by what we call body language. Some people just sort of quickly disclose their feelings about whether or not you're effective or it's coming across, and they just sort of relay to you by their, what we call body language. It's kind of a new study. I haven't studied that much about it, but there is a book called How to Read a Person Like a Book. How to Read a Person Like a Book by Nuremberg. You just might make a little study on that. Now, don't get too involved in it, because sometimes you can so watch somebody in the way they blink their eyes, and you know, you're looking at their ears and looking at their hair, and now you get too carried away and trying to figure out, you know, all about them. But you can get some indication. But here's what'll play you good no matter what. It's called just pure common sense. You just look at somebody, you can kind of tell. If somebody just folds their arms and they tuck their head down like this, sure enough, you've probably got some more selling to do. I mean, you've got to pour it on, or maybe you should change the subject, or maybe you should quit, right? You just kind of analyze, what's going on here, right? Some things are just fairly obvious. If a guy's leaning toward the door like this, it's probably a sign, right? I mean, you say, oh, I got it, right? Clear. I've got a good word for the common sense approach, and it goes like this. Let the obvious be your best teacher. Whatever you do, don't ignore the obvious. Sometimes we say, oh, it couldn't be. Yes, it probably is. But adults especially, sometimes this is a bit tricky. People smile, nod their head like this, and they got you shut off, and you just don't know. Okay. Because in good communication, you cannot mistake courtesy for interest. Sometimes people will be courteous, but that doesn't mean they're interested. Now, if you mistake their courtesy for their interest, now, see, you've lost the hold on good communication. Also, you can also develop a sense of picking up signals. I think the women probably have it over on the men when it comes to this sort of sixth sense of being able to tell, no matter what the situation looks like. Women have this uncanny gift. I guess men can develop it, but the women already have it. The antenna is out. I mean, they pick up signals nobody else can pick up. I mean, the men don't have a chance. I think part of it is because until the industrialized society came, women were primarily the protectors. The man was the provider, right? He was gone. He was out there getting the game or whatever, and the woman was the protector. So I think the woman has devised these incredible sensitivities to danger and what's going on, what's happening. They're uncanny. Even the Bible says there's sheep and there's the shepherd, and then there's the wolves. That's what it says. Life is kind of like that, shepherd and sheep and wolves. It says also some wolves are so clever, they've learned to dress up like sheep and talk like sheep, I guess. That's what it says. Some are wolves in what? Sheep's clothes. Now, see, you got to be clever. Huh. The man says, well, looks like a sheep, talks like a sheep. Woman says, ain't no sheep. I mean, take my word for it. But that's that long developed instinct, I guess, right? In the middle of the night, she says, wake up, something isn't right out there. He says, right? I mean, he's gone, right? She says, no, something, right? She has this uncanny sense. So that's part of, being able to read is picking up. Mr. Schoaf called it signals. He says we all throw off signals, vibrations. I don't understand all I know about that. But have you heard the expression, a dog can tell whether or not you're afraid of him? I guess that's true. We throw off a certain kind of signal, and animals, right? They just pick it up. They know. And you can't fake them out, right? You can say, I'm not afraid of you. Dog says, who are you kidding, right? I mean, come on. Okay, being able to read. That's so important, reading your audience. How you're doing. Should you speed up? Should you slow down? Should you change the subject? Should you be a little stronger? Just be more aware of whoever you're talking to, right? Look a little more intently at somebody. Try to pick up what's happening between you and the audience or the person or the child or the business partner. You can't believe how it will affect your ability to communicate if you'll practice this part of picking up what's happening between you and someone else. Now here's number 4. Then we're going to take our first break. The fourth step to good communication is intensity. Strong feelings. Here's what changes the whole effectiveness of good communication. Strong feelings. In affecting other people with words, here's a key breakdown to keep in mind. And it goes like this. To affect other people with words, it's 20% what you know, and it's 80% how you feel. Feelings and emotions changes the whole outcome of communication. Intensity. Words loaded with emotion have the best effect. Words might be like a little straight pin. Right? When a guy buys a shirt, right? It's got all these little pins in it, right? Where they pinned all together. So you start pulling out all these straight pins. What if I took one of those straight pins and I threw it at you, this little straight pin, and it reached you, hit you in the face or hit you in the arm, hand somewhere, right? You'd feel it if I threw that little straight pin at you. What if I took that straight pin and wired it to the end of an iron bar about that long, right? And I let you have it with that. See, I could drive that pin right through your heart, right? Now, the pin is the words, and the iron bar is the emotions, the feelings, the awareness, the uniqueness of all of that mysterious stuff that humans are made of. If you will learn to put more of you into what you say, put more feelings, more awareness, more uniqueness, strength of character, conviction, strong feelings, whatever that is, just be more aware of putting more of you into whatever you say. That's that iron bar that drives what you say to the heart, to the mind, and gets the job done. Words loaded with emotion. Now, you must also learn to measure your emotions. Okay? You don't want a major outburst for a minor point. Learn to measure it. Okay? Some conversations or some points may need, right, just a mild blend of emotional feelings. And then another point may need a strong one. But you got to learn to measure that, okay? Not too much for something minor. You don't want to shoot a cannon at a rabbit. Right? It's effective, but you got no more rabbit. So learn to measure your emotions. Now, here's something important. Where does emotion come from? Where do our feelings come from? Here's where they come from. The emotions that can really help in all of your future conversations, communication. It's the blend of all of your experiences and how they have affected you. The blend of all of your experiences and how they have affected you. That creates now your emotional content, creates your emotional vitality and worth. So that's part of the getting ready experience on the emotional side. Be aware of your feelings. Be aware of your emotions. And as that experience grows, now when you get ready to talk, you've got the blend of knowledge and the blend of feelings to put into your conversation. And that's what creates the power. Now I have one more point and we'll take our break. It says, don't forget to say it. Part of communication is simply being aware that more often than not, things need to be said. It's pretty easy to take for granted, especially the people that are close around us, that they already know how we feel. But you got to keep expressing how you feel. Here's a good phrase. Actions are no substitute for words. Now, we've used the other phrase, right? That words are no substitute for action, and that's true. Just talk, 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 and not acting. See, that's not good. But here's what else is not good. All of the action and no talk. Make sure that the words accompany the action. Don't fail to say it. Probably one of the greatest difficulties in married life is this breakdown in communication. Not clearing the air often enough. Not keeping this open dialogue going constantly. One thing I found out, take nothing for granted. Say, well, surely they understand. Well, just explain it one more time. Just say it one more time. Don't take a chance that whether they know it or not. Bring up the subject again. Make sure it's clear. It's too easy to let it slide and not make it clear, especially the people around you. Say, how often do you have to tell the people that you love them? How often? Answer, often. Often. We all need reassurance. We all need it to be clear and pointed so that we know. There are some things you just don't let go. And there are some actions that will only say certain things they won't say at all. You can give somebody flowers, but flowers won't do all the talking. Flowers say, you remembered. That's probably what flowers say. But flowers don't say, you do incredible things to me. Nobody affects me like you do. Now, see, flowers will talk, but they won't say that. That's the card you've got to put along with the flowers. Let the flowers say whatever they can say, but then don't fail to put the other words with it, because the words are so important. Judy gave me this watch back when I had a birthday in 1972, I believe it was. And it was a neat watch, Le Coultre. If all goes wrong, I can cash the watch in and live for a while, right? I mean, Judy was always doing things like that. Fabulous watch, neat gift for my birthday. But see, better than the watch was what she wrote on the back. I appreciated the watch, but the words were better than the watch. On the back, she had inscribed, "My love for all time. Your Judy." September 1972. See, the watch was neat, but the words. She could have put the words on a Mickey Mouse watch. Pardon me, Walt. I didn't mean to downgrade your mouse. But see, the words were what was really important. So I'm saying, let actions speak, but make sure the actions don't substitute for the words. Make sure you say it. And if you'll make sure you'll say it, you'll get better at it. You'll get the practice. You'll learn to put more feelings in it. You'll learn to say it well, say it better. And this whole process of communication for you, if you don't treat any of it casually, will start to grow. And you will be even startled in the next few weeks, the next few months, at what happens as a result of your future conversations. If you become more aware of these things that we have just talked about. Sensitivity, fascination, interest, working knowledge, having something good to say, saying it well, reading the effect you're having, and the intensity of strong feelings. Okay, our next subject under communication is how to make a presentation. Our next subject under communication is how to make a presentation. And whether it's a presentation to a child, or a presentation to a business client, or a sales presentation, or whatever kind of presentation. We're all making presentations all day long, every day, business, social, personal, whatever. I have 4 parts to the presentation for you to consider. Here's the first one, identification. One of the most important parts of the presentation process is identification. Identification is, for a new person that you haven't met before, it's getting acquainted, it's breaking the ice. It's building a bridge between you and someone else. establishing contact, getting somebody's attention. So it's a very important part of the presentation process. Sometimes those first few seconds, sometimes that first minute is just so important to establishing rapport, establishing contact. Somebody once said, you never have a second chance to make a first impression. So sometimes how those opening seconds go is very important. But that's identification. Getting acquainted. Some people find this easy. Some people find it more difficult. What we're doing is, pointing it out so that you can start working on it deliberately instead of haphazardly, or instead of just letting it go, wondering why things aren't going well. We just pick it as a part of the presentation so you can go to work on it. Identification. In identifying with someone, one of the best ways is to pick something you have in common to get the conversation started with. Somebody mentioned during the break they attended this leadership seminar up at the ranch. You were up there 3-4 years ago. And everybody got acquainted up there real easy. And the reason is because when you met somebody new, you would say, hi, how are you? Did you get as lost as I did trying to find this place? And everybody says, yeah, I got lost too. And that immediately starts this, little more friendly process of getting acquainted simply because you had a recent experience that you could talk about. So identification is trying to find something you have in common with someone else. You want something that makes you real, something that makes you a person that someone would desire to talk to. In the identification process, we use this little mental phrase. We want somebody to say, me too. Say, well, here's what happened to me. Somebody says, well, me too. I got lost. They say, well, me too. Here's how I felt. Someone says, I understand how that feels. Me too. Here's a reaction you don't want. The reaction called, so what? Now, usually one of the problems in people's trying to identify is they try to impress versus express. Mr. Schoaf gave me a little counsel on this. Don't try to impress, he said. Rather, learn to express. Express will get you more me toos. Impressing will get you more so whats. See, so what puts up the barrier instead of building a bridge. It blocks this flow of communication. Usually when we introduce somebody, the introduction's usually full of so whats. One of the biggest challenges I have in doing seminars is to overcome my introduction. Usually an introduction, you have to give your list of credits. But when somebody gets through with he's president of this and vice president of this, and he's got several companies, corporations, does business around the world, those are pretty well so whats. And I guess we consider it sort of standard, the so whats. So one of the first things I do when I come up on the platform, and I get the polite applause. And I understand it's polite applause. It's just part of the routine, right, that we go through. If you take that serious, you're in trouble, right? But, you get the polite applause. So I walk up after all these credits, right? And I can tell that people are, saying, who is this guy? And is he really all he's cracked up to be, right? You can just feel all this going on in the audience. So I usually try to just, break that down just as quickly as I can by saying something like, I appreciate the warm welcome. Did you hear what the cow said to the farmer on a cold winter morning? Right? Thanks for the warm hand, right? And it goes over about like it did here, right? I mean, it just sort of, hangs out there. And that's to kind of let people know that, we're not interested in the chairman title or the president's title. We're here to just, talk person to person. And part of that is just an attempt to identify, to let everybody know you're not up there to talk down at them. You're not there to try to impress them with your success or anything else. We're there to really share ideas. But that's always a challenge. And every person and every audience is a brand new challenge. Every time you talk with somebody, it's a brand new challenge to identify. Now, here's what you must do with someone who you already know. Re-identify. You don't get this identification process once when you get to know somebody and then it's forever over. You must constantly re-identify. No matter how long you've known somebody, they still want to know what are you feeling and what's going on with you and what are you thinking, and right? Everybody wants to know that, even if we've been around somebody for a long time. When you meet somebody, that's why we use those expressions. If we've known somebody for years, if we see them again, we say, how are you and how are you doing? That's to get this thing going, this identification process going between us and someone else. Now, in the identification process, make sure if you tell little stories about yourself in identifying, make sure that they're accurate stories. Part of my identification I sprinkle throughout the whole evening seminar. My little story about meeting the little Girl Scout, selling me Girl Scout cookies, right? That's just a little story to try to keep identifying with my audience, to keep them on my side, right? That's identification story. Right. She gives me this unique presentation, asked me if I want to buy, and I wanted to, but I didn't have $2. Now, see, I can almost hear everybody out in the audience say, well, I know what that's like. I've been caught without any money. I know how embarrassing that is. See, that's an identification story. Somebody says, I know how that feels. And I say, to this day, I can remember the pain. Somebody says, I've had some of that pain too. I know what that's like. All of that is identification. So you have to re-identify. If you're talking with somebody over any length of time, you just re-identify little stories, things that's happened to you. So go back over your life and pick out the things that will identify with people. Now you've got the challenge of also identifying with a variety of people from different backgrounds and different businesses than your own. And you just learn to do that, different age groups. Part of it is just being more aware of what's going on in the world so that you can just intelligently talk about some things with people from almost any walk of life. Okay? Jesus, the master teacher, was probably one of the great identifiers of all time. He had this incredible knack of talking to somebody with language that they understood what he was saying. One day he said to those around him, today I'm going to teach you how to fish. Guess who he was talking to? A bunch of fishermen. He said, gentlemen, today we're going to have some lessons on how to fish. Only I don't want to teach you how to fish for fish, because you already know how to do that. What I want to do is to teach you how to fish for people. Now, see, he couldn't have chosen a better identification. He didn't say, I'm going to teach you how to recruit. I mean, what do they know from recruiting? No. He said, I'm going to teach you how to fish. Now, when you're talking to fishermen, that's clever, right? You don't say recruit when you're talking to fishermen. You say fish. See, that's incredible. You just learn when you talk fishermen, talk a little fish talk, right? If you talk to lawyers, just talk a little lawyer talk. I mean, you just learn how, right? Go sit in the courtroom and, learn a little lawyer talk if you're going to talk to lawyers. Or get in trouble and go to court, right? And sit on the witness stand and whatever. Just so that you can learn to identify. See, I've been through it, I know it, and analyze who you're talking to and see if you can't pick out certain ways to identify. Now, of course, there's some stories that are common to us all. And sometimes it doesn't take much of a story to identify. Here's a good one. How to identify with kids. Let me give you some keys. First, read all their books. One of the best ways to identify with kids is read all their books. If you've got a 12-year-old, you just read all their books so that you know them forwards and backwards. So you can use those books as a means of identification in stories. Say, remember that story, when? Kid says, did you read that book? Say, I read them all. I know all those stories. And remember when? And you can use 1,000 illustrations from those books that you've read to get a point across, to get something across. It's a means of identification. Read their books. Then when you get ready to talk, you got something in common. They've read the book, you've read the book. And it's loaded probably with illustrations and points and ideas and human life stories of disappointment and success and failure, all of that. The way to identify is find out what someone else is interested in, find out who they are, how old they are, what they do, what's going on, and see if in your reservoir of experience and awareness you can't find something that will identify and cause this person to say, me too, I understand that, and you've got them coming your way. Then also a way to identify with kids is to remember when you were a kid. See, I don't have any problem talking to 12-year-olds because I remember every day about being 12. I remember all those experiences in detail. The highs, the lows, the exciting times, the desperate times. When I thought the world was coming to an end, and when I was riding on top. I remember all those feelings. Did you ever get chosen last? That ever happen to you? They're choosing up sides, right? So I'll take you, I'll take you, I'll take you, I'll take you, and you're standing like this. See, all you got to do is go back over, search around in your life. You can find 1,000 ways to identify with all kinds of people from your own life experiences. Okay? You don't have to go anywhere else except to your own life to come up with all kinds of ways to identify with anybody. But here's what you got to do. You got to do it consciously. Consciously, deliberately. What can I pick? What can I think of that will help this conversation, that will get my idea across? Who am I talking to? Oh, yes. Here's what I'll use. Right? Your mind just, like a computer, starts picking up all these things. This is why it's so important to keep a journal. And when you think of a life experience and say, oh, I could use that life experience in a variety of ways. You put that life experience in your journal. You go over it. You think about it. Then when you get ready to talk, it's instant recall. You'll remember it. And you can't believe what you can do with people from all walks of life, business, social, personal. If you will learn the identification process, do it deliberately. Pick out things that you have in common, feelings you have in common with everybody. Okay? Identification. And then pick up stories from all kinds of life situations that are similar to yours. Somebody had a feeling of disappointment. You say, I know what that's like, but I'm going to use that story to illustrate disappointment. Just be aware. The movies you attend and the books you read and the stories you hear. Be a gatherer of life's experiences so that you can use them all for points of reference and points of identification. When a teenager watches the movie Gone with the Wind, they see one kind of movie. When you're in your 20s and 30s and you see Gone with the Wind, you see a different kind of movie. Right? When you get along into your 40s, 50s, sure enough, it's a different kind of movie. Because now you're reading between the lines. Now you're sensing what the real tragedy was, what the complications of life were. It's altogether different at 40 than it is at 14. Same movie, only now you're seeing it. You're picking up all the different parts of the story and the feelings of the story. It's getting to you. But that's part of the identification process. Just be more aware of what you see and what you read and what's happening to you so that you say, oh, there's something I could use. There's something I could use. I'll use that. The next time I talk to people like this, I'll tell them this. I'll tell them this. I'll use this story. That's part of the identification process, building this bridge.